Hey, this is StarCraft 2 History, and this time I am going to talk about Maru. And with me is another huge fan. Basically, all these guests are huge fans of these specific players. And this is someone you may not have heard of or may not know, but it's Soularion. And he is a Team Liquid Rider, has been for 5 years now, I believe.
I think,
Maybe
yeah,
6.
4 years. I
So,
think four
I
years.
don't
I
know.
joined in 2014,
Yeah,
so
basically,
four
basically a
years.
child to me, but I've been around. They're all childs to me. That includes Ollie. That includes all the rest. I have somehow outsurvived everybody, but what you may not know is he is a huge Mario fan and has followed his career pretty much the entire way. I'd probably say. So let's get into it. So, do you want to just go chronologically or what?
Well, we can either start with his rocky rocky history and Winds of Liberty,
All right, we'll go
or
with
we
the
could
worst.
talk about or we could start in OSL basically. But there are a few things to mention in Winds of Liberty, I guess.
All right, so I'll go through Wings of Liberty real quick then, because that's the more
Yeah.
boring part of his history. Maru is one of the few players you can call the first class, and what I mean by that is he's one of the only players left that has played in the GSL Open Season 1, and so that was a, over 7 years ago, basically. That's a
Yeah.
it's been a while. So for people who don't know, the other guys that have survived that long, besides Maru, is actually no, Polt, Tage are both out. TLO is still around. Bjorn is still around. Bjorn was a Protoss player during that run, if you guys didn't know. And let's see, there might be like one more, Lucira.
I think yeah, Lucira and I'm not
Artosis, I
sure.
guess. I guess Artosis is a caster.
Yeah,
He has
I
somehow
guess
survived
that counts.
all
Yeah.
this shit. Yes. So, no,
Pretty crazy.
yeah, not very many of these guys around left. And obviously, Mario is probably the greatest of them that is still playing by a long shot. But basically, to put it in perspective, the only game you really see of Maru in that GSL Open Season 1, and I talk about it in like the initial openings of the StarCraft 2 History series, is his game versus Sella, where he basically bodies the shit out of Sella with just micro. So that was pretty enjoyable. But then you don't really get to
Yeah.
see him for a long period of time. Basically, unless you are following the online leagues or you are looking at the Code B qualifiers, and back then they were sometimes streamed. It really depended on if Caldor could get into the studio or not. But yeah, basically it's like he's just stuck down there for like a long period of time. Then we go into Wings of Liberty. And now Wings of Liberty, he does have one good game where, besides like Team League, I guess, where he's like, wow, this guy might be something. And it's the game versus effort. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. The Entombed Valley game where he has the ridiculous hold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was watching that in prep,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like one of the one of the first moments I really recall being impressed with StarCraft. I think I watched it like I'll get more into like how I got into StarCraft when we get to OSL, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a crazy moment for sure, going back and rewatching that, where he does a lot of the micro tricks we see today. You pull the SCVs, you hold micro them, you focus the Banelands, which everyone freaks out about Beyond now doing that, and here's Maru doing it. I think 5 years ago,
Six
something
years
like
ago.
that.
Yeah. It's been a while. Um, and this was during, of course, the darkest era of StarCraft 2
Yeah.
history, Broodlord and Fester. So, just to put that into context, it's pretty fucking incredible, all things considered. And it's like one of the first times the mainstream get to see what Mario is about. And it takes him a long time to like really push his style forward because Mario is a different beast compared to a majority of the Terran players. So what I mean by different beast is, and this is just to set up what's going to happen when we get into Heart of the Swarm. So what I mean by different beast is there are basically two ways you can reach the top of any competitive game, in theory anyway. The first way is to be the best at the current meta, which is, most effective tactic available. So we're thinking of somebody like Innovation's pretty great at that, assuming Terran is stronger than the rest of the races. Even just slightly, then I think Innovation will have a pretty good edge against everybody. And then there is the other type of player, the type of player who finds his own way, and yeah, they have a lot of basics behind them, and they build that over time. But after a while, they break open the rules because now that they've mastered the rules, they find a way to break them open and find their own path, so to speak. And so there are plenty of players like that throughout StarCraft 2 history. Generally, the greatest ones. So MVP was definitely one of them. Tasia is definitely one of them. Life definitely one of them, and Maru is definitely one of them. But he takes a long time to build up his style because it is so execution based, so micro intensive, and so
It's also just worth noting that he's crazy young.
yeah,
Like
he is
he's
crazy
so
fucking
young.
young.
He's so young that when he first made GSL Codes in 2012, almost 2 years after he made his debut, he
Hmm.
was the youngest player to make Codes, I think, ever. He was 14,
Yeah,
and he got all the way to the round of 16 and BMC.
yeah,
He ended up losing to Oz, which is kind of unfortunate because that would have given us this wonderful best of five between Parhin and Maru, which admittedly Maru probably would have gotten absolutely smashed, but it would have been nice to see those guys play all the way back then.
yeah. And we're gonna get back to that parting Maru thing because parting
Yeah.
fucking knows Maru better than anybody in the world, I
Yeah.
think.
There's some players that Maru does not have a good time against, and Parhin is definitely one of them.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree there. Like basically Maru is the youngest there ever was. Like when we talk about like phenoms, he's definitely way up there. Though he doesn't actually get that hype until we get into like Heart of the Swarm, basically, because his style is like so crazy. Like it's like it doesn't seem like it's possible to make happen. And that in that sense, he's actually very similar to Life, because if you ever watched the old Life VODs, like nobody really understood what Life was trying to do, and obviously Life himself wasn't really trying to go hard at it. But once he started doing it, he breaks open the entire game for Zero getting away. So Mario is a very similar kind of player, except unlike Life, his style and his play and his thinking can't be copied by the rest of the Terran race. So it's very complicated situation. Like there are players that tried, like I think Bunny, the foreign Terran from Liquid.
Yeah.
He tried to play like Maru for a lot of the Heart of the Swarm, but he couldn't hang. That shit is really hard to do, basically.
And now you can even see people like you, Thermal, who I know is a massive Maru fan and
Hmm.
tries to do a lot of the micro tricks. And it's it's just because Maru is such a unique talent. Like even if you have stuff that can vaguely approach his micro, which not many people do,
Hmm.
it's so hard to imitate
Thinking, maybe.
his way of thinking. Yeah, he has great instincts for the game,
Hmm.
and this leads him to, of course, be a wonderful cheese player, but it also lets him snuff out cheeses pretty well. We'll get into that more later, of course, but he has this interesting play style where you always have to be on your toes when you play against him because at any moment he could pull something out, like some weird trick that'll throw you off guard, whether it's a cheese or just a drop or a way of engagement. And no one can imitate that, I think.
Yeah,
There's
no.
very few players who come close, like
Uh,
maybe Taja.
like Tage is a completely different kind of player, but if we're just talking about like decision making, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and
The,
like fight engagement and
yeah,
that
but
sort of
I guess
style.
we can talk about it later. I guess talk about it now, may as well. I think Maru has been way more on the attack for a
Yeah.
majority of his career, whereas like Tage has been way more on the defense. And it's only in
Mhm.
the modern age where you see Maru in Legacy of the Void, basically, where he starts like shifting over more towards that defensive style.
we've seen hints of it
Yeah,
throughout his career, where I think it's always been known that he kind of can play this weird macro style. Like we saw him try to use it against Soulkey in like the GSL that Soulkey won.
yeah,
It didn't end up working there, but those were some pretty entertaining games.
and
And
then
of course we see it like
you see it pretty
uh
early on too. To be fair,
yeah.
like Maru versus Rain, the OSL finals, he basically pulls it
Of
out.
course, which we'll talk about that OSL quite a lot, I think, because
Uh,
as a momentous moment. Of
yeah,
course, there's a game against Hero that I always bring up on Vanny, which was
hmm
absolutely insane to me. And there's other games like when he plays Zest in Code and
yeah.
Legacy of the Void and has those ridiculous macro games.
hmm
Like he definitely has
It's definitely been
instinct.
in there, but it's never been his
Now he's
primary
starting
thing
to,
until
yeah.
recently, basically.
hmm
And it's not surprising, but basically the way I think of Maru is like he's definitely a guy who like he's he's very similar to SOS, I guess, in that he has his own like drum. He beats to it, and like
hmm
nobody, nobody's influencing Maru. Maru has no father. There is no father to his style. That ODB
Yeah.
shit, right?
Yeah.
And that's always why Maru's always been such a spectacular player to follow. Whether or not he's winning or losing is because he's never going to sell his soul to the meta, sell his soul to the balance or whatever is going on. Like this is like when I talk about innovation, I always have to bring up the critique that he never was that great in any of the metas where Terran was weak. I can
Yeah.
never bring that up for Maru because Maru has always been not always, but he's always shown he can beat it or shown he is better than the meta. So that's always something you can't really critique Maru on so much. And
It's kind of weirdly the opposite, really. Like there's a lot of metas where Terran is really strong.
mm-hmm,
Like if we think at like towards the end of 2015,
yeah,
or like I think towards the end of 2014 too,
mm-hmm,
Terran was starting to get pretty good.
yeah,
And that's like he was good, but he wasn't great during those times. It's almost like he's better when Terran's like
weak.
not very good
Yeah, very
because
similar, I guess, to
maybe
Polt.
it makes his style less predictable in a way
I
because people aren't as used to playing against Terrans maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to say why without like really going into it,
Yeah.
but that's something to keep in mind. And now we're gonna go to. I guess we'll go straight to the OSL because I think
Yeah.
that's his huge breakout. And I'll put some context into here. Basically, the elephant in the room, which is this idea that all the ESF players are bad, all the Kespa players were going to take over, and that's kind of half right, half wrong, depending on who was saying it
Yeah.
and the reasoning. But basically, Maru was a guy like nobody thought was very good at the time, like straight up, like no, everybody thought he was kind of like a
Yeah.
mediocre Terran.
Like he was not some hero of ESF. He was like pretty bad, and almost everyone thought he was pretty bad, and he'd probably get bounced out in the first round.
Yeah.
Which is why that run became such an absolute miracle.
hmm So basically, to put it in perspective, Bomber was considered one of the better ESF players, and Bomber was straight up being called a third-rate Terran on casts, in forums, and stuff like that. And Maru wasn't even on Bomber's level at that point. At least he didn't have the social recognition, right? And so when he gets past the first group, which is the round 32, basically everybody's like, it's just best of ones. That's just bullshit. Whatever, right?
Yeah.
But he did outplay SOS in a macro game, and that's actually when I started paying attention because, like, okay, this is because a lot of like foreigner fans didn't have that much like respect for SOS at that point. They don't really get it until they see him at BlizzCon. But I thought SOS was pretty
Honest,
fucking good.
honestly, I don't think they really got it until he made BlizzCon finals and won it a second time. Like his first BlizzCon win, people were
Yeah,
pretty
maybe that's
salty
true.
about that.
I was pretty happy. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. That was a very entertaining tournament for you with Duck Duck being innovation.
Yeah. Listen, it's not my fault. History keeps proving me right. That's all I gotta say. All I gotta say about that. So yeah, Oh, go ahead.
It's kind of interesting with the recent GSL. A lot of people, both in Team Liquid and I think on the forums too, are making the joke that stats gets underrated in every single round. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, he ended up losing in the finals. But in that OSL, Maru was literally the heavy underdog in every single round.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one even predicted him to make it. Well, no one really predicted it to make him past his group, but if he did, it would have been like Behin Su an effort and be in second behind SOS.
Mm-hmm.
No one thought he'd beat SOS. His round of 16 group was quite easy, but even then, it was like considered more or less a coin flip as to who gets out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then round of 8, he went up against Symbol.
Yeah.
And Symbol was good at the time. He was definitely a good player, but he wasn't like crazy elite. And people still thought Symbol would just wipe the floor with him.
Yeah, I remember
I
that.
actually went through and in the live report threads, the Team Liquid forum threads,
Mm-hmm.
they have this poll-in option where you can vote for one player to win. And in the round of 8, the round of 4, and the finals, Maru was picked by only around 20-25% of people in all 3 rounds. And he won all 3 series without even coming to a 5th or 7th game.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's. You could make a case for that OSL being one of the single biggest underdog tournament runs in the history of StarCraft 2. Maybe even counting Brood War. Like, it was an absolutely insane moment, and it really broke Maru through.
Yeah.
Like, even just, and of course, that series against Innovation is probably the crown jewel of it.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start there
Moment.
this time because I'll set this up because I enjoy building up innovation and seeing him get knocked down. So innovation was straight up. Also, I still believe this to this day. That 2013 is innovation's peak prime and still
Yeah,
is. And
I
he,
definitely agree.
yeah. So
Overall,
yeah. So basically, I felt he was legitimately a fucking monster in every matchup, and even his like QT, which was his relative weakness, was still pretty good. And always thought he was he was at the time supposed to be winning these titles. Like he was supposed to win GSL, but then he kind of
yeah.
chokes. Not kind of. He actually super chokes.
Yeah, that was a
Basically,
pretty bad set.
yeah, pretty bad say. Basically, super chokes in the first GSL, and then he plays against Maru, and in this one, and he is highly favored to beat Maru. Basically, for whatever I forget why, but I think there was a reason. It might have been I might have actually wrote this one. I'm not sure. But basically, I said something like Mario was going to beat up Innovation, just because of the way their styles matched up. Where Innovation, I thought, was still really weak to early game stuff, and he didn't truly respect series planning the way he should have, and he didn't really
Mhm.
respect the matchup versus matchup, as in not Terran versus Terran, but like player versus player, as he should have. And that's basically what happens. Like Maru makes Innovation look like a fucking clown in this series, and it's actually one of the most mysterious series from my point of view because it looks like if you just look at it from the outside and you analyze build to build to build to build, it's pretty clear. It looks pretty clear that it looks planned. And what I mean by that is like he does a cheese in game one, but the reaction to that cheese it is the reaction to that cheese he predict in game two he predicts that with like a different kind of cheese that'll beat that reaction, and then he does that in game three, and then he
Yeah.
does that in game four basically, and basically it looks like oh wow he was like playing innovation all along, like wow this is fucking amazing. As it turned out, I don't actually think Maru is that type of player. It just worked out against innovation that time.
Like, that is a very strange moment in history and probably the most surprising 4-0 of all time. Like, it is just inconceivable. It's worth mentioning that some people did have Maru win in that series,
Mm-hmm.
but no one had him like winning it 4-0 the way he did, where
Yeah,
innovation wasn't even close in a single game.
yeah.
Like, that was just a beatdown.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it comes from maybe it was like actual just series planning, or maybe it was just Maru kind of instinctively making these adjustments to his build as he went along.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I find it incredibly impressive.
Yeah, it's a great series, not in terms of entertainment, but in terms of how like foolish he kind of makes this at the time the best player in the world look.
Mhm.
And and then he goes on to play against Rain, and now Rain is considered the best Protoss at the time. I think rightfully so. And this is another one where people were thinking, okay, Rain beat Supernova, Rain beat Bomber, Rain, even though he basically like I don't know how you want to say this, but basically there was some fuckery going around in the round 16.
Yeah.
There was some fuckery going around. I don't mind saying it. Listen, there's only two SKT players. Why are they playing last? Why is it that Fantasy gets to play Rain when Fantasy no longer needs a win and Rain needs a win to make a tiebreaker? I don't know, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
Fantasy takes the fall. I will say Fantasy probably would have lost anyway, but the fact that it was last is like really pisses me off.
It was interesting. That group in general was a very odd time. That was a very, very strange group.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically Rain's considered like the best PvT at that point, and he goes up against Maru. And do you remember this series?
Yeah, I remember it pretty well. This is kind of, I guess, a bit of a tangent, but it's related.
Okay.
When I first got into watching StarCraft, it was in this OSL. I think the OSL was already over, but it was like the most recent tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went back and I watched all the VODs. And I, of course, with absolutely no context, you hear the casters talking like innovation is great, Flash is great, Rain is great. And I think I got like through the round of 32 and maybe into the round of 16. And then I look at the page and I'm like, Maru won? How? What? I haven't heard anything about this guy. Like, I saw him play 2 games and the casters were like, whatever on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that finals against Rain is really like the moment where Maru becomes a great player.
Okay.
The series against Innovation was, if he gets 4-0'd by Rain, if he just gets beat by Rain in macro games, I think people would have just used that series to say like, okay, Innovation played really bad, and Maru had like a fluke win based on cheese.
Yeah.
But his series against Rain, he won it in, I think, pretty much straight up macro games against the best Protoss of that time. And it's just utterly insane. Of course, he had some cheesiness, like very classic Maru style. Okay, I'm down 0-2. Let's use the proxy 2-racks,
Yes.
which he's gone for a lot in his career. But then he followed that up with like 2 different macro wins. Like, it's very, very impressive.
See, Rain could have easily gotten 3-0 up here if he had Parting as his coach. Because what would happen is Parting would have told him the very obvious tell that Maru had. Apparently, only Parting knew this for years. Is like, if Maru goes down in a series, he will immediately revert to a 2-ax.
Yeah, and we saw that in WESG finals when he goes down 2-3 and just 2-racks his way to the championship.
Yeah, man. Dark should have watched my podcast. If he had known, he would have known, man. Because I basically called that out before that tournament even happened. But yeah, it's a trick he goes to time and time again, and this time he catches Rain off guard. And then actually, like you said, he goes to the macro game and they beats down Rain, takes his OSL, and wins his first ever title. Now, you want to explain Season 2 finals?
Well, you see, Maru did not play very well in Season 2 finals.
No.
That was not a good tournament for a lot of players.
That was great.
And maybe it was because of the flight distance from Korea to Europe or something, but a lot of the Korean players underperformed pretty brutally there. Like, Rain got 3-0'd by Teja, Maru lost to Scarlet, Innovation lost to Duck and Nano. Or no, he lost to Teja and Nanoa. Probably would have lost to Duck too.
He would eventually lose to Duck, yes.
Yeah. And even first got 3-0'd by Jadon. Like that was just a bad tournament for pretty much everyone in the Korean scene.
Except me.
And I
It
don't
was great.
even, yeah, it was a great tournament for the viewers. Phenomenal games like Bombers Run, Innovation versus Teja. Amazing.
Tasia
Even I
versus
think
Rain. Yeah. A
yeah,
lot of
I
great
think the
games.
Jadon versus MC series was really good too.
Yeah, it was.
But none of the Maru games were pretty much any good. As far as I remember, I think he just kind of looked bad and got outplayed.
Yeah.
Which happens with Maru sometimes. Sometimes things just don't click with him and he just kind of falls apart.
And
And that's made following Maru a very tumultuous experience for me.
all right, so I will I'll give Mario a break here because this is basically his second foreigner land ever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, StarCraft 2, the community like doesn't really respect the distinct challenges a foreigner land or weekender can bring. So obviously, he talked about like travel. Then it's like it's a different environment. Maybe the PCs aren't quite right. Maybe there's something wrong with them. Maybe the diet is wrong. Your sleep schedule is off. Like there's some scientific study where like you're sleeping outside of your home gets worse by like 50%. So you're like not as well rested. But it's not like they have 5 slip discs. So 2 in the neck, 3 in the back. Shout out to MVP, the greatest of all time. And there it is. There it is. You all knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Still fine with jet lag. Still fine against Brewer and Fester. But that innovation guy, he couldn't handle the heat, and he actually ran into Tasia, played basically the best game of his life against Tasia. Got outplayed by Tasia, and that's kind of how it went. But back to Maru, of course. So basically, Maru goes back, and then Maru starts. Maru is, in my opinion, at this point, even though he like basically fails season 2 finals, I actually think he is the best Terran in Korea, basically, and he's either the best or second best, best or second best Terran in the world, depending on where you put Tasia.
And that kind of gets proven as we go into GSL and we see innovation struggle with Don Regu, that phenomenal series, and he ends up losing in the round of 16 to Jack G and Sue back before Sue was this absolute monster.
Well, I mean, this would be the time when Sue starts becoming the absolute monster.
Much the time when he became a monster, yeah.
Yeah, but he lost to Jock G.
The time when, yeah, he lost to Jock G, who, man,
he was solid.
How did that happen? How did that happen? How did Jock G beat GSL finalist Sue and Innovation back-to-back in 2013?
Okay, well,
that's a crazy moment in time.
If you think about it, basically everybody's been telling me the highest level of skill is always the most modern era, whatever else people might say, and then Jock G from 2011 shows up in 2013, beats down Innovation, beats down Sue, and basically, and from my opinion, he was actually a pretty solid player. He has like a bit,
yeah.
He certainly had a bit of a unique style to him, but especially in TVT, he's always been fairly good. And Innovation, like I said, he had a fairly weak TVT. That even goes into the modern day where like Innovation in like 2017 was like losing to Ryung from 2012 or some shit, like, or Alive from 2013 or some shit, like come on guys, like you can't have it both ways. You can't be the most modern skill and then losing to like these guys from like ages ago. But whatever the case, basically that's how I kind of think of it. Is like Jock G was no joke, no matter what people were saying.
Played well. Jock G played well.
Yeah, no matter what.
I think that was he got to the round of 8 and ended up losing to Maru.
Yeah.
In a pretty fun set, I remember.
Yeah, basically it was a pretty close set, and then he beats Rain in the side.
Yeah.
Because basically there has to be a 5th place match in order to get to like WCS season 3 finals, I believe.
Yeah.
He beats Rain.
Yeah, and then Jock G beats Rain.
Jock G beats Rain, and then he loses a trap. So he was no joke. He was actually pretty good at that point. But certainly we have to go back to Maru now, because this is like Maru's. Yeah. This is actually supposed to be about Maru. It's not supposed to be about whatever else. Round 32 I can skip. Okay. Let's go to the
Maru. I think that was the season where Maru really came into his own as a TVT player. Like even in the round of 32, he beat Beyond, who was pretty good at TBT at the time, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
then of course he played that wonderful series with Flash. He beat Jockji in the round of 8. Like that was Maru's TBT is probably the least flashy of his matchups
Yeah.
because while in TVP, and TVZ, he relies on micro a lot. His TVT is actually very old school.
Yeah.
Like he plays remarkably similar to people like Polt and Gumiho from back in the day, where he's comfortable having these very long, drawn out,
Yeah.
gritty games. And I think it really started to evolve more in 2014 and 2015, but he had this phenomenal style where he would just pretty much sacrifice banshees, just send banshees in, get a few worker kills, distract the opponent some,
Mm-hmm.
and that plays into the gritty griminess of his TBT style,
Yeah.
which is very odd compared to his micro-based TVP and TVZ.
Yeah. Basically, Maru lived in like one of the hardest times for Terran versus Terran. I still think that's the case. Like, yeah, we can say the Kespa era is probably the strongest, specifically from 2013 to 2015, probably. But if we're talking about like that specific matchup, I think a lot of the
Yeah.
best Terran players in TVT, a lot of them were in from 2011 to 2012, and a
Hmm.
lot of them basically drop off or leave Korea, and so you have like basically the proof is like Jockji, Ryung, Alive. They all beat Innovation. There's Maru, like I said, MVP before the injuries. Polt, amazing. Tasia, amazing. Marine King was no joke back then. Like I said, a bunch of great TVT players, and Maru was playing during that time, so it's not surprising that he has that old school kind of mentality. And
And
when you look at the way like the Kespa Terrans turned out beyond like the really great ones, like Innovation, Flash at times. Ty is a bit of an interesting case just because he plays such a weird style, but the rest of them like they don't really show any of those flashes of greatness in TVT, and part of it might just be due to the WCS split. And
yeah, it's also worth noting that when he really became good in like early 2013,
mhm,
well, early HOTS 2013, that was like the Hellbat era. And the
yeah,
Hellbat era was like peak gritty TVT almost
mhm,
because you just sacrifice like your entire mineral line would just die in like 3 seconds to Hellbat.
yeah, you,
So I think that really influenced his style too, where he started learning like, okay, how can I like what's the real value of killing someone's mineral line or sending in this banshee and maybe like definitely losing it, but maybe getting some mineral line damage. Like
mhm,
it shaped his style, which was originated in this epic TVT scene of 2011, 2012.
yeah. And from what I remember, actually, there's this funny the Flash Maru series is just this funny thing where Maru does a cheese and then he like beats up Flash with it, and then Flash ends up doing the same cheese or a similar type of cheese on the third game, and then Maru perfectly defends it. So I just thought that was like a really funny sort of mirror in that sense. But we'll go on to I think what's the most important matchup. The one he loses is the round of 4 against Deer. Do you remember this one?
Yeah, that was the not as great Deer series, but
It was still pretty
I
great.
I didn't I, that wasn't quite when I was watching it live, so I don't remember it as well as I watched some later stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that was definitely like the moment where Maru kind of let dominance slip his fingertips. Because if we think about it, if he wins that set, we go on to the finals. And either we have Sue win a finals, which changes his storyline for years to come, or we have Maru win a GSL finals and suddenly he's a back-to-back Korean champion.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's like, holy crap, he's the best player in the world.
Yeah.
But instead, Deer comes along and steals that wonderful timeline from us, plays utterly phenomenal, and ends up beating up Sue in the finals too. But the Maru set was, as far as I remember, it was kind of disappointing play from Maru, and just Deer being this very clean opponent who kind of deflected a lot of his
stuff.
A lot of his aggression, and Deer responded with his own aggression, and
Yeah,
it felt pretty easy for Deer, honestly. Easier than it probably should be.
well, I mean, to be fair, Deer is basically um, the first of what would later be known as the Blink era, and so
Yeah.
he understood that way better than the rest of the Protosses at the time. And Maru sadly was also ahead of his time, but he was using that Marine Marauder medevac a mine composition. But this was before the mines were super buffed. So he had a like really fucking micro hard. Like if you look at the one game he plays on Polar Knight, like he
Yeah.
has to literally do this weird trick where the second these zealots start charging on a marine or marauder, he shifts his entire unit ball to put that unit in the back, so that they have to go all the way around, so he gets a way more free shots. So basically, Maru was like doing crazy fucking shit just to stay afloat. So I actually think it's a pretty good series if you look at the context of the fact that basically
It's true.
Protoss was
does
pretty strong, Terran was pretty weak.
I think you could definitely make a case for Maru's entire career being, if this guy knows how to defend my proxy 2-racks, then I'm gonna lose the series, and if he doesn't, then I'm gonna win the series.
Maybe that's
And that definitely played into Deer, where he used the proxy 2-racks in game 4, and it did not work because he tried it on Derelict Watcher, which is a pretty huge map, and Deer definitely watched your podcast from the future where you were talking about how Maru always uses
maybe
2-racks when he's down.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's a common theme. It's just
Yeah.
it's just something that people should know by now, except apparently Dark.
Yeah.
And now he's paying that $100,000 fine for not listening to my wisdom. How does that feel? Tough.
Well.
That's tough. But moving on, WCS Season 3 Finals is the next one. And this is another one where I think Maru does very well here.
Oh yeah, for sure. That was his first international good performance.
Mm-hmm.
He came to Toronto and he just played wonderful games.
Mm-hmm.
He looked a little sloppy in group stage, but by the time he got to quarterfinals, he really started getting his confidence back up, and he ended up losing to Deer, but that was when Deer was like absolutely unstoppable. And even then, that was like an all-time great series.
Yes.
That game on Frost.
That game on
everyone
Frost
loves
is
it.
amazing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Where Mari's like trying to micro his one medevac.
Yeah. He microed the shit out of that one medevac, so
Yeah, man, you give Maru like 10 units and he will do everything possible with those 10 units.
Yeah.
I think that's the philosophy that leads him to doing proxy 2-rack so much. Because it's like, if I just have 8 Marines, I will micro those 8 Marines so well that you will die to them.
Or maybe he's just trying to relive the MVP moment in his life.
Maybe he's just really trying to become the next MVP and just 2-racks every
his
time.
fucking style right now is very similar to 2011 MVP.
Yeah,
so.
It's actually probably the most similar style we've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, so
it's quite impressive.
Yeah, so we'll get to that a little later on, just a teaser, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then now he goes for another top 4, this time at BlizzCon 2013.
I'm gonna make the slightly bold statement that Maru just got really goddamn unlucky, because I think in all of his round of 4s, he faced the opponent that would have been harder for him. Like, if he was on the other side of the bracket for GSL or for WCS Season 3 Finals or for BlizzCon, I'm pretty sure he makes the finals. But unfortunately, he runs into like a player who's very good against him quite early.
Yeah, I mean,
compared to what he could have done.
We all can't be MVP and win in our worst matchup anyway. So yes.
Yeah.
That is true. He was in a sense unlucky. But I feel like SOS would have been a fucking problem for him. I think it would have been Bomber though.
It's kind of, I don't know.
I guess SOS is dangerous, right? SOS is like weird.
Maru versus SOS in that time would have been a wonderful set to see.
Yeah.
I wish we got that. Although the Maru Jadon series was really fun as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think Jadon really elevated his play during that BlizzCon.
Yeah. That was probably the peak of Jadon's skill in SC2, I would say.
Yeah.
People like to slightly overrate it, but Jadon does deserve some real credit for how he played in the series versus Deer and the series versus Maru.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he got fucking wrecked by SOS super fucking
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he completely disappeared against SOS.
Like
Which
literally,
was sad.
SOS like literally like I don't know when did Inception come out, but basically that's what SOS did. Is like he incepted Jaedong's mind. You will not win. I will not win. And it's like basically just like ruined Jaedong's life in that very one moment.
Yeah.
Jaedong was
And then
never the same.
Jadon was never that good again,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
It's too bad, but yeah, Maru himself makes a pretty good run here. Like I said, great series against Jaedong, beats MC, beats Duck Duck, and a lot of people think Duck Duck was free win, including Innovation. But guess what? Innovation got eliminated.
Duck Duck was like mini SOS that tournament.
Yeah.
Like he was using some very finicky strategies. And I remember just watching that series and being like, come on, Murray. Like please just get to the round of 4. Like you have the easy bracket until round of 4. Like just make it there.
Yo man, Innovation thought he had an easy bracket till he met Duck Duck.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not so easy beating lesser players, despite what all of Tasia's critics say. It's actually pretty fucking hard sometimes.
It's tough to be consistent in StarCraft, even if you play against lesser opponents. Like StarCraft is a game with so much variance that dominance really should be respected more, I think.
Yeah.
And that kind of speaks to this obscene stretch of consistency we see from Maru.
Yeah.
That really started in this set of round of 4 and only grew as he, got involved in Pro League and all of that. And he was just good season after season, after season, even though he was never the best.
I guess I'll touch on it now because I usually don't talk about Pro League that much. But basically, Maru, for the entire time, after he joins Kespa, basically, so he goes from Prime to Jin. So basically, from this entire moment onwards, he's always playing in the individual leagues and he's always playing in Pro League, and he's always either the best or second best player on his team at any given point. So this guy was pretty legit in that sense, because that's something you have to consider with a bunch of the Kespa pros is some of them are good in Pro League, some of them are good in individual league and doesn't necessarily transfer over, but Maru was one of the rare ones where he was consistently good at both.
Like Maru was one of the most ridiculously dominant players in Pro League during his tenure there. He had the most wins in 2014. He had 30 wins that season.
Yeah.
He had 27 wins, the second most in 2015, and he had 22 wins on a ridiculous 85% win rate in 2016. Like those are 3 absolutely phenomenal Pro League seasons, and they're backed up by constant tales of his wonderful play in the playoffs as well. Whether that's like his game versus Solar that I loved so much in 2014, I think. Yeah, 2014. Or like all killing that ridiculous KT team with Life and Zest and Flash.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Not gonna lie.
Well, Pro League for a lot of players is kind of secondary, but Maru is one of those guys who definitely deserves a lot of recognition for the type of things he's been able to consistently do in Pro League.
Yep.
And we probably won't talk about it too much. Maybe we'll save that for a Pro League episode, but it's definitely something that should be appreciated. And if you want to go back and watch Maru VODs from Pro League, the man plays some really fun, entertaining, high-quality StarCraft there, day in and day out.
Yep. And now we'll go to Hot 6 Cup. This is another top 4.
Yeah.
The end of the year.
Yeah.
And this one's not as great.
He ended the year with 4 consecutive round of 4s.
Yes.
Which is pretty rough. Didn't make a single finals. And he was 1 game away from the round of 4 in 2014 season 1 also.
Yeah.
Although that was a much more impressive round of 8 than some of his others. In fact, that is like really when I think people started to rally around Maru because that was peak Blink era.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just go ahead and skip over because the Hot 6 one is basically him beating Sue, which
Yeah, the Hot 6 one is just like, hey, he played, he lost. Like, it wasn't that entertaining of a series. Well, no, it was a
no,
pretty
Soul
good
Key was
series
pretty
from what I
good, but like
remember.
that was like Soul Key before he burned out.
Yeah,
It's basically
yeah, that was like good Sulky. And Sulky back in the day was someone who definitely beat up on Maru quite a bit.
mm-hmm.
Maru always struggled with like macro Zergs who were good, but also knew how to play aggressive from time to time. Like he struggled with Biel, he struggled with Dark until recently. He struggled with Sulky. He
with
struggled
life.
with Sue for a bit also, with Life.
Yeah,
Like his TVZ has definitely been probably his most problematic matchup in my opinion. But it's not bad.
but
He
it's also
plays
because he's
good
like running
sets
into
in
like the
it.
all-time great CVT players.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's rough out there. It's rough out
Yeah.
there.
He played during probably the hardest era of competition from, mid late
Yeah,
2013 all the way to 2016.
yeah,
And now if you want to count 2017, 2018, he also played those years as well.
yeah. I
So,
don't think they're like the highest competition, but they are definitely.
yeah. If you want to make an argument that they're high levels of competition, he's also been great then also.
Yeah, but
So
yeah, it's also been great then. Yes, like his only weak period is basically when he first starts and he's like super young. But
yeah, when he was like 12 years old and he still made GSL Codas round of 16.
yeah, yeah, young kid. But basically, what's great about this one, his first GSL run in 2014, is he runs
Yeah.
into the group of death in round 16. So he plays against
Yeah.
Zest, Deer, and Sulky. And now, for those who don't know, basically, Zest is one of the all-time great Prodosses. Deer was still considered the best Prodoss at the time, and Sulky was considered the best Zerg at the time. So basically, Maru beats up Zest and Deer to get out. And
And that was like a terrible meta for TVP.
yeah, basically the worst meta for TVP. You want to know how bad it was?
Yeah.
Basically, innovation didn't exist in this GSL.
I think he lost. Who did he even lose to in Code?
He
Wasn't it like Ruin?
let me check. No, Ruin he lost to in the GSTL or something.
Oh, he lost to Hero and Zest. Okay, that's not so bad. That's more understandable, I guess.
I
But
mean, listen.
you had stuff like Flash lost to Yanhua, Gumiho lost to Classic before Classic was
Well,
as good of a player.
Gumiho was pretty bad back
Hey,
then. That's not. I'm not. Listen,
okay,
I'm all for.
fair,
I'm all for
but
pushing out that Blink era shit, but Gumiho was not good that point.
yeah, it's true. It's true. But
Listen, yes,
pretty much every Terran just died.
every Terran just died except, of course, for Maru, Tasia, and Pult. And yes,
Yeah.
Innovation did lose to Zest and Hero, but guess who Pult had to beat? Classic and Rain. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's reality for you. So, like I said, it's not impossible. Imbalance can be overcome, and Maru did beat that imbalance this time. So those were actually pretty good series overall.
Yeah, especially that Deer series
Yeah.
with the game on Heavy Rain.
Yeah, and basically, I
I
think
guess,
this is like the last time Deer is great
yeah.
for a long
he kind of
time.
knocked Deer into irrelevance a little bit.
Yeah.
Which it's funny to know that Deer was actually good into 2014 because a lot of people like to just forget about him after that BlizzCon run, but he was really good in the series.
Yeah,
Like
was.
he was one game away from eliminating Zest, and then Zest went on to like revolutionize PvP right afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another really big what if right there.
Yeah.
If Deer beats Zest there, a significant amount of change happens to the StarCraft scene.
Yeah.
And Sue probably wins another finals also.
One day, Sue will win the finals, but that day
Pretty
is not
much
today.
every significant what if in StarCraft history involves Sue winning the GSL finals.
That's because it is actually the most important story in StarCraft 2 history,
Yeah.
like bar none. It is Sue winning the GSL finals. Listen, man, I'll go off topic for a bit, but if you actually, this is for the people out there who actually believe that Korea, and what I mean by Korea is like the GSLs are the most important events of the of the year and like the only ones that matter. If you actually think that's the case, then I think you're the only player you can put as greatest of all time is Sue, basically. Like even though he wins none of them.
Yeah.
Like
I have Sue really high on my GOAT list. I have him higher than Innovation, which
it's kind of crazy to
feels
think
weird
about,
to
right?
say, but the man has made 6 GSL finals.
That's literally
Like,
impossible for anybody else.
It's absurd.
It's,
like I think has Innovation done that?
No,
I don't think so.
Innovation hasn't done
I
that.
think MVP did it.
MVP
I think
did
MVP
it. Like
made 6.
MVP made 6 basically, and one of them was like a world championship. So not many people count that, or some like that one's more iffy. But 5 is pretty fucking great anyway. So 5 to 6, and then Sue definitely got like the hard 6. So
yeah. Like what he's done is definitely some absolutely phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, basically, if you want to hear my theory about greatest of all time, it's not like there's a definitive one, but in order to be in the conversation, you have to have some kind of feat that is unreplicatable by everybody else in the scene. So Sue, all this GSL finals, MVP, like all that crazy shit he did.
Pretty much every part of his career.
Yeah.
Like, MVP is a ridiculous player.
Yeah.
And your fascination with him as well does.
Yeah. And like basically the time period he did it was fucking crazy because it was like very condensed. He doesn't have his career is basically half as long as Innovations, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, like think about that. Like his career is half as long as Innovations. Like Tasia is a very similar case. Like half as long as career as Innovation, but like he was so consistently good in the highest period, and he beat all the best players, had winning rates against all the greatest of all time. Then there's like fucking Life, the highest peak anybody's ever seen, and all this other crazy shit about Life. Like basically, if you want to be in the conversation, you have to have something that the other 4 didn't somehow do. Is my opinion of those 4.
I think you made this point that Life is either the luckiest gambler of all time or just like this absolute next level mind games player.
Yeah. It's hard to say with him. Very hard to say.
Really, it's hard to say sometimes, but it's absolutely crazy.
Like, is it like can somebody really get that lucky that many times? It's hard for me to believe that personally. So I actually think he's like this next level dude, but who knows? Like he did live his life a bit YOLO if you think about it. Like, so
I think we can re-examine the whole GOAT conversation we're done with Maru's history.
Yeah,
because I think one thing we should try to do here is attempt to place Maru in this GOAT. Obviously, he's not in the GOAT conversation, but with his GSL title, it's a good opportunity to re-examine where he stands.
Yeah.
And I think we can have some interesting conversations about that.
Sure.
But we should wrap up the rest of his career first.
So yeah, basically, Maru had the unfortunate circumstance of running into Life when Life cared.
Yeah.
And so there's very few players that could beat Life when Life cares. Like one of them was like Tasia.
And that was a fun series too. That was a pretty nice series to watch.
Yeah.
Like again, even when Maru loses, he's really enjoyable, fascinating series. I think I went through as Team Liquid writers, we keep a document with honorable mentions for the best games list.
Yeah.
And for 2014, we had like 80 games total, because that was a wonderful year for StarCraft. Seriously.
Yeah.
And like I counted it up. I think the second most seen player was Polt. Like Polt played 11, I think.
Yeah.
And Maru played like 19. Like Maru played a ridiculous number of high quality games that year.
That's because between the two of them, they're
just
like
absolutely absurd.
But it's interesting you know that because like they're both from Prime and they're both like extremely stylistic players. And unlike Marine King, they actually put their brain into the game. So
yeah, unlike Marine King, they had a brain.
Yes, and it's true. Basically, I don't have much respect for Marine King's mind. Certainly a great mechanical player. But yeah, with Maru, he's like such an entertaining player all the time. But like I said, he basically ran into like the wrong guy, which was Life. Like Life was extremely good at this point. Like he basically had a period at the end of 2013 running into the beginning of 2014 where he was trying again. And it just so happens like he ran into Tasia a few times in 2013, so it was rough for him.
Yeah.
And then in 2014, he runs into Godsu, basically. So what are you going to do against Godsu if you're not in the finals? Like, that's tough, but yeah.
And Maru's streak kind of continues. He has this nice run in Season 2, gets to the semifinals, loses to Classic. Classic really did some wonderful bag of tricks there.
Yeah.
He had a proxy gateway. He used Phoenix Colossus. Like, I don't think that was the origination of Phoenix Colossus, but that was one of the first series where I really saw it used like heavily.
I'll give you a tidbit because this isn't something I put in the StarCraft 2 history. As far as we know, the proliferation of Phoenix Colossus, like nobody knows who the originator was because I've actually seen it in bits and points and Wings of Liberty. But the guy who really used it as a main style for a long period of time was actually Jim. And the reason Jim used it, and Jim, for those who don't know, is a Chinese player. The reason Jim used it was because he was forced to play around 300 ping to play on the Korean server. So he basically needed a composition that auto-microed itself, and that is Phoenix Colossus. Yeah, so there you go. That's a nice little tidbit for those who don't know.
And then I think people like Myonsik started using it a lot.
And then it started spreading across Korea.
I think, of course, Classic wasn't the first person to use it, but that was like, I think one of the first times I saw it used in like a GSL semifinals, like this massive set. And it's a tough composition to micro against.
Yeah.
The effort it takes from Maru to execute against it is much higher than the effort it takes for Classic to utilize it.
Clearly, it's a guy. It's made by a guy who's like playing on 300 ping. Yes.
Which, of course, it's not like a statement like Protoss is easy compared to Terran because Protoss's difficulties are elsewhere. But it is a really smart move by Classic. People underestimate how smart Classic is. Yeah. And that was a great example of it right there. He came up with he used this wonderful composition to beat up on Maru.
Yeah.
And he also used a bunch of observers and controlled his drops very well.
Yeah.
And then Maru fell off for a bit because Terran wasn't imbalanced anymore. And when Terran's not terrible, Maru doesn't play as well for whatever weird reason.
But he still got to the round of 4. Like, still, what do you want to what do you want to say? That's still pretty good. Like, it's not like this was a crazy season. Like, I think his other one was better, season 1. But
and season 3, he ended up losing in the group death to, Stats and Parhin with Innovation as the other guy. Like, that's pretty brutal right there.
Well, this was before I think Stats was considered good.
So, but Stats kind of came into his own that season. He definitely
basically, I was the only person saying Stats was good for like 2014 to 2015. I'm like, no, you guys don't understand. He's like the 6 or 7 best Protoss, and it was like, no, you're fucking crazy. It's like, okay, we'll see. Now I have been proven right. History has proven me right. Despite Stats losing in the GSL finals, he's still pretty fucking good. But he had Maru also had the unfortunate circumstance of playing against Parting. Like I said, Parting owns his mind.
Parhin, man. Oh, God. Parhin, there's a lot of people that you don't want to see Maru play in a tournament if you're a Maru fan. But Parhin has to be the highest name on that list.
Absolutely.
Like, even when Maru beats Parhin, which, just to skip ahead a bit, he played Parhin and beat him in the next GSL 2015 Season 1. And then he lost to him later that day.
Yes.
So, even when he wins, it's
loses.
not in the right time.
Yes, even when he wins, he loses.
Yeah.
I guess we'll go on to 2015 because this is like another good year.
Yeah.
And this is...
I think early 2015 is, until now, the best Maru we've seen.
Yeah.
Early 2015, he was in contention for best in the world. And if life wasn't, having the best peak of StarCraft history damn near, then I think Maru could have easily been best in the world there. I think he was second best for a moment in time.
Yeah.
He did phenomenal in Pro League. He had that wonderful IEM Taipei run, which featured his great series against Hero and epic series against Life 7-game series. Life went full-on God mode.
Yeah, Life is fucking untouchable.
That's a series.
Right?
That was a series that you just need to watch watch. If you're one of those people who think like Life isn't all that great, or maybe people overestimate him, like go back and watch that Life Maru series, or really any of his matches from that history, because people were bringing his all against him every night, and Life still won
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah, basically,
Just
I personally think this is the highest peak of skill any player has ever touched in StarCraft 2.
yeah,
His life.
you could yeah. I think early 2015 Life was because he played such good players
Yeah.
day in day out. He played peak Maru. He played Innovation, who was not peak but very good at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He played peak Hero. He played peak Parhin.
He played peak...
Dream. He played Dream, who wasn't even good. But when Dream played Life, Dream became like the best TVZ player to ever play the game. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yes.
And he wasn't even good at the matchup. Like, he just wanted to beat Life.
Hey man, he had to defend that throne, man. He had to defend the dignity of MVP, who had 5 slip discs. Clearly, that was the reason as to why Dream did all of that. And to build up on that, basically, Life, he also killed Zest and Tasia at BlizzCon. Like, this was the year before that. So basically, from the end of 2014 to the beginning of 2015, that's the most dominant period of skill any player has ever had, is Life. And so losing to Life like 3-4, that's no shame. That's no shame.
No shame. No shame at all. Pretty much everyone was doing that at that time period.
Like, literally, like, Dream is the only guy who stopped Life. It was a rough time.
Then, in SSL, I mean, Maru of course had his SSL tournament championship here, and phenomenal run. That game against Selenoc where he microed like SCVs and Marines in like an early 2-racks SCV pull. That game against Stats, the game 6, where he was like, okay, this series has gone on too long. It's time to just legitimately out multitask you the entire game through.
Yep.
Like, that was ridiculous.
So yeah, Maru wins this season. I will say it would have been cool to see Maru versus Life, but Dream had other plans. Dream had to defend.
We could have legitimately seen 3 Maru versus Life best of 7s in a month. If Life had beaten Dream at SSL, we would have seen one in the finals.
Yeah.
And if Maru had beaten Hero in GSL in that really close series, he would have gone on to play Rogue. I think we can all agree Maru probably beats Rogue in that series, and then we would have seen Life Maru in the semifinals of GSL. Also, we could have seen 3 best of 7s between the two, and that would have been amazing.
Listen, I will say Maru versus Life is like one of the all-time great series. But so was Life versus Dream, both of them. So like it. Yeah. I don't regret how things turned out. I don't regret how things turned out.
Like, that was a great time for StarCraft.
Yeah, I don't regret how things turned out at all. Basically, because
not at all.
Like to put it this way, basically, in one of the previous ones, I had 2 of them actually. I had Ollie on because he's a diehard Protoss fan, loves himself some Zest, loves himself some Liquid Hero.
Yeah.
My God, he basically, this guy, when we talked about a little bit about Life, we're like, is he the luckiest man of all time, or is he like this next level mind gamer? Ollie's like, this motherfucker is the luckiest bastard of all time, every single time. And the only time he actually like legitimately gives praise to Life is when he loses Dream, because it's like Life had to go so fucking hard in those matches against Dream, and it's like, okay, Jesus Christ, you are the real deal. This is like some next level shit, even though you lost, basically. Yeah, that's how it was back then.
Yeah,
and of course, like Life basically loses interest or starts match fixing around this point.
Starts doing some random garbage. Like, he played that really, god damn, that I Am World Championship was a weird tournament.
Yeah,
like Maru just got 3-0 fucked by Dark, not Dream.
Yeah,
he just got crushed by Dark. That is, I think, one of the most unpleasant series to watch as a Maru fan in his entire career. Like, I think Dark started doing the thing where you build corruptors as in your like Lin, Muta, and Maru just had no answer. He just kept trying to fight him, and
it totally didn't work.
Somehow Trap made the finals. Zest played Innovation in like the worst set ever by two great players. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I forget which game it was, but one of those games was an all-time worst game.
There's
Like one of
yeah.
those games was. I gotta look this up
You
actually.
gotta
I
look it
I
up.
have
How
to.
terrible was this
I have.
game?
It was the Zest versus Innovation, like failed Oracle micro into like literally Innovation just giving up. I don't. I guess I'm just gonna have to try and find it another game. It was one of the games from their set against in IM World Championship,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just freaking terrible.
Yeah, the fact that I don't remember it is the fact that it must have been terrible.
Yeah,
Like I try to
think
block out those games from my mind.
nah, I might try and look for it, but probably not.
All right.
I don't think I.
Basically,
Yeah.
we'll just
Okay.
move on. We
So
will move on.
yeah, we'll just move on. And if I find it, I'll bring it up later maybe.
Okay, so basically,
Um.
we're gonna run into the era of the Kongs. That's what I call 2015. Because Dream, Beal, Dark, Stats to a lesser extent. I don't think Stats is actually a Kong. I just think he wasn't that good yet. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But basically, a bunch of Kongs rise up, all in the name of Su, because Su himself is done. But a Kong must always remain, I guess. That's how it went. And throughout this time, Maru's been pretty consistent. He gets to the playoffs a bunch. GSL Season 2 got to the playoffs.
I mean, this was just kind of when Maru was. He was a good player still. Like he had great performances, but he wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Like he kind of peaked early in early 2015, and after that he played against Rain when Rain won the GSL. Just wasn't really good enough to compete in that series. Rain did the right things to make Maru tick.
Yeah.
He played against Hero in SSL. Hero had that phenomenal Immortal build in Game 5, and Maru didn't really have an answer for it. It's the tough part of StarCraft where you have to have answers for your opponent night in, night out. And if you don't, then this happens where you just like you don't quite click, even if you're playing well otherwise. And that happened to Maru in mid-late 2015.
Yeah.
Although he was still a good player.
And then at the end, Season 3 he does get another top 4. This time loses to Innovation.
Yeah, Innovation got one. He got his revenge.
Yeah, finally.
And
yes.
yeah,
Pretty good season from Innovation overall, I'd say. Strangely, like it was like one of those weird typical Innovation ones where it's like it wasn't that interesting because he was better than the majority of the players until Beal.
Yeah.
And then Beal himself is a Kong, so he obviously choked in the finals.
Yeah.
So, what do you want me to say?
It's basically like Innovation just knew how to play Mech TVZ, and the only person who was good against that was Beal, but Beal was in a final, so that negated his powers.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunate.
Yes.
And then Maru went to BlizzCon, got 3-0'd by Rogue. Another very ugly, bad series. Like, unfortunate. That's just what happens sometimes. When you're a Maru fan, you can't get too hyped. Sometimes you just completely get fucked.
Yeah, I suppose that's one way to look at it, being a Maru fan.
Yeah.
All right.
And speaking of getting absolutely screwed over, this brings us to Legacy of the Void, and arguably the single most stacked Code A match of all time, Maru versus Zest. Like, legitimately, Zest at that point was
by far the best player.
You could make a case for Zest at like early Legacy of the Void actually being the best player, like the highest peak of all time relative to competition.
Basically,
although I think that's more because I think that's just because nobody else really knew how to play Legacy of the Void.
Yeah.
So Zest just like won GSL. He lost 3 games the entire way. And unfortunately, Maru had to play him in Code.
Yeah.
They played a very good set.
Yeah.
It was only 3 games, but Maru had some really interesting builds. He played macro, like he looked really good. Unfortunately for him, He lost in Code A. He doesn't get to go to Code S. And I think that's his only Code A stint from like the time from Heart of the Swarm to now is that season.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's the only time he didn't. Oh no, he missed one in late 2016 too, I think. Or was there only 2 GSL
There's only
seasons
two.
that year?
There's only two, I think.
Okay, then no, he hasn't missed a GSL Code S from Heart of the Swarm to now, except for that season where he drew the best player ever.
Mm-hmm.
But
so basically,
16 was okay. You can go.
Let's time to skip forward. Basically, 2016 was pretty depressing because when Maru was good, he couldn't get into GSL and he had no other choice. He had no other choices, and then by the time he could get in, he was bad, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So let's just get 2016. That was pretty depressing.
It's a very weird year because his results in tournaments were terrible. Like so terrible that if that's all you looked at, you would be like, damn, I think Maru's finally done. Like, is he just gonna kind of retire soon? Like he looks so far from what he once was. Mm-hmm. But then you look at Pro League and he has like one of the best Pro League seasons ever. And it stops making sense. Mm-hmm. But 2016 was an odd year for the Korean scene, so it's kind of worth skipping over at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And we get into 2017.
2017 wasn't that great for him, to be honest.
Yeah, but it was a lot better than what preceded it, at least.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's better.
It's just... Yeah.
I'll give you that.
He looked like an actual player again. Yeah. But yeah, this is kind of the issue that I started seeing with Maru is like he just didn't find that spark again. Like his micro wasn't really as clean as it used to be, which is normal for Terrans. Like after a few years of being really good, unless you're innovation and you basically just take months off because you don't make any big tournaments.
Shout out to innovation for playing League of Legends for a year. Yes.
Unless you do something like that, Terrans kind of naturally get a lot more wear and tear because they're micro intensive. Mm-hmm. So, and Maru needs the micro to do well, or at least he did until recently.
Yes.
So he lost to Ryan, he lost to Gumiho. Like, he just lost these sets against people who were, I guess, smarter than him. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have an answer for that. He couldn't just out-micro them because he didn't really have the micro. Yeah. So, and that brings us to more or less modern day, where he's just struggling because he doesn't have the micro to keep up. So his answer is to finally become the macro player that I think I knew he could be for years now.
Basically, what happened was... He opened up that history book and asked himself, who was the greatest of all time player? Wait, it's MVP. What did MVP do in 2011? And he somehow reinvented the entire thing in a different expansion.
Yeah, like this is just an incredible run we're seeing from Maru. Admittedly, he choked away that Rogue series pretty terribly, or else he might be like, I am WESG and GSL champions. Mm-hmm. But again, Rogue is kind of in that spot where Rogue's very smart, and Rogue kind of knows what builds make Maru tick.
Yeah.
And that's something Maru has always struggled with. Like, if you have a very good game plan for Maru, and on top of that, you're a very good fundamental player, then he does bend pretty easily.
Yeah.
Which is probably his biggest weakness as a player, and that's cost him countless best of fives, especially in 2015. Mm-hmm. But he finally he embraced macro more, and he found this really cool Raven build in TVZ that nobody has been able to stop, even slightly. Absolutely crushed everything at WESG, beat Dark, and of course in GSL. That Dark series in GSL was absolutely phenomenal.
It feels like the actual finals, basically.
Yeah. I actually watched the finals almost live. Mm-hmm. I was going to watch it live, but I fell asleep. Mm-hmm. So I watched it the day after without seeing the result. And that was a fine finals. I mean,
but was it?
I think that was kind of like stats misplaying more than Maru playing well. Mm-hmm. But Maru did what he had to do. Like, he just came in, he played straight up mid games. Like,
like basically it's not like a match I'll remember. Like,
Yeah.
but put it this way, I'll remember like Weseg and the semifinals
Mhm.
more than I will that match,
Yeah.
right?
Like this was just kind of after beating up on Dark the way he did, Maru deserved to win the GSL.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of did. It felt like Stats was a bit nervous, especially in game one. Maybe if Stats wins that game one, the entire series changes and becomes a lot more interesting. But for the most part, Stats just didn't feel like he could come close to Maru in late game.
Mm-hmm.
So he tried to play him in mid game, and then Maru just kind of beat him in mid game.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of an unfortunate series for him, but yeah, Maru is absolutely phenomenal right now. He will play in Super Tournament. He will play in the next GSL. So he actually plays Sue in the Super Tournament.
Yeah.
So that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
I think if Maru makes a Super Tournament run, then it's going to be crazy. It's going to be like a very good run of form for him. Absolutely great.
All right. So let's talk about Maru a bit. Basically,
Yeah.
there's this funny sort of thing that happened where like Wax was like just spamming, "You have to go watch all these TVZ games." So I went and watched all these TVZ games, and basically, it's a very interesting sort of study and dissertation on what Maru is thinking throughout the entire time. Because this is going to go back all the way to the beginning where I said Maru is a completely different type of player for innovation in the sense that innovation will take whatever standard at the time, the meta, and then refine it, and that's how he's going to be good. And we know this because innovation got eliminated in the current GSL, whereas Maru has won it. And how did Maru win it? Basically, in my opinion, the most important matchup is TVZ because I feel like Dark was his biggest threat, all things considered. And outside of what he does in outside of the Maru build, basically, there was no other answer for Zerg that was good. And so you watch all these games. So I did. So Maru versus Solar, Maru versus Rogue, then Weseg. That's like Maru versus Nurchio, Maru versus Scarlet, Maru versus Serral, Maru versus Dark. Like,
Yeah.
and then you finally get the finale, which is Maru versus Dark in the semifinals. And
Yeah.
here's the way I saw it. Basically, is Maru is concurrently building using two types of compositions at once. The first one is the one we all know about. It's the mech, which is the mass like Banshee, speed Banshee, cloak Banshee, and
Yeah.
his idea is like very similar to what you were talking about earlier when he was talking about his TVT, right? Like just all this mass damage going around, and then he is expanding and building undefeatable army behind it, which is Raven Ghost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first one, and he also has like tanks in there to like defend, basically. And then the other one is he's still using bio, and then he starts playing around with it. Basically, like he has a few cheeses. Like obviously he still has like the 2 racks, and he still has some cyclone builds, but he's using a bunch of. But when you're looking at the macro builds, you can kind of tell he's basically experimenting the entire time. And what I mean by that is like sometimes there's this like random series where he tries like Thor's, and then he throws that out after he realizes that's not working. Goes back to Banshees. Then he plays around with like Hellbats, with Hellions. He plays around with like a bunch of these different sort of compositions and these different builds. And he ends up coming to this very strange sort of cul-de-sac, basically, where he plays against because both of these builds are, by the way, are working. Both his bio and his mech build are basically working against everybody. But he runs into this almost like cul-de-sac, basically, against Dark in the Westsec finals. And it's important to note also he also loses to Rogue in IEM World Championship. And basically what Rogue does is just hits the shit out of him before Maru gets up going.
Yeah. Which I think Stats tried to do, but unfortunately Stats wasn't as good at it.
Yeah, basically I actually think that's the correct move. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can win even if it's the correct move because you have to execute it.
Which is probably the scary thing about this oncoming Sue series, which happens basically 2 days from now.
Yeah.
As of this being, filmed. But That's going to be a very interesting series because Sue is, of course, someone who game plans very thoroughly.
Yeah.
And he'll have to come up with an answer. And I trust in Sue to come up with a very interesting answer at the very least, even if it's like kind of maybe not the best answer. I think he'll try something, and we'll definitely see an interesting series there.
Yeah. So basically, we go into the second chapter of this Maru versus Dark thing and the Maru build thing. And so he starts using this mech against Dark. And Dark, like basically partway through the series, figures it out. What I mean by that is like he figures out how to deal with all this Banshee shenanigans. And then because he's able to deal with that, Maru isn't getting as much damage going in relative to the other Zergs he's beating the shit out of. And so Dark is able to deal with Maru in the late game and be able to beat him in the late game. He's able to beat because what's going to happen is Maru might have like more his like army value is higher, but he cannot resupply the way Dark does. So Dark has this longer timing where basically if he just keeps hitting Maru over and over again, he will kill Maru before he has enough energy to reach the like maximum like energy output point for like his ultimate army of Raven Ghost.
Yeah.
Right? And so Maru kind of realizes, oh shit, Dark is about to win if I play this again. And then Maru pulls open the book, and then he says, "Oh, hi, parting. There you are. Let me adjust 2 racks in real fast." And then, of course, Dark didn't open the same book, and then Maru wins.
Yeah.
And
I was really surprised that Dark fell for that, honestly. Like,
yo, man, should have watched my podcast.
That was one hell of a save by Maru.
Yeah, basically, Maru jacked Dark. Maru jacked Dark of all that money.
Yeah. Like, Dark completely played the series phenomenally well, figured out Maru's strategy, and Maru just punched him in the mouth and ran off with his money.
Yeah.
Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, but so basically Maru wins, but Maru is smart enough to realize, even though he won, Dark had the answer.
Yeah.
And so Maru comes up with a new answer, and that's to combine the bio build he had and part of the mech build he had, which is basically late game composition. Because if you actually look at one of these games he plays against Dark, I forget which one. Well, basically what happens is he did try to do this before. He did try to play bio into late game Raven Ghost. And what happens is he doesn't really understand that bio is super weak on the defensive. Because obviously when he was a bio player, he was always on the aggressive. He was always the one doing the timing attack, the one doing the pushing. But in this new build, new composition, he has to be on the one that's defensive until he gets the Raven Ghost up. So Dark gets ahead, Dark smashes him. That's basically the answer, right? And so Maru looks at that game, and then goes into the GSL semifinals, and he thinks to himself, how do I fix this problem? And basically, from what I see strategically and tactically, Maru is no longer using his bio like the old days where he would do the parade push, the famous like innovation style parade push where you just keep going until you're dead or he's dead. What he did was he would send them out and almost like Teja-esque style or basically Teja-esque style where he attack the extremities. He would deny the economy as much as he can while keeping his units as much as he can, basically making cost-effective trades. And then at the same time, with that extra money, what happened is because he's also getting 3/3, his ghosts are naturally stronger. But what he's also doing is he's adding in a mech idea, which is to build SimCity into his like outside bases. And you basically see that throughout this series is every time like Dark attacks and Dark destroys like the SimCity, Maru immediately rebuilds it because he starts to realize you need those extra choke points if you want to defend with bio against the Zerg force and get to the late composition. He does that, and then Dark has no answer. And then Maru also reverts back to the mech on the biggest map possible. I forget which one it's called, and that works too. Because what happens is like even I forget what exactly it is, but it's like fucking gigantic basically. And from what I saw is like Maru's like, okay, I can hide an expansion, and he did that. And then because I have that extra expansion, I have the extra economy, and then I can play the mech style that he's used to playing. but without like the problem of running out of money and like running out of resources, and Dark never scouts it until it's like way too late. So that's the entire Maru versus Dark epic,
Yeah.
in a sense.
It's been a very interesting stretch of Maru just playing TVZ and trying to refine his build.
Yeah.
And I think something that really helps him is that Maru has always had this open mind when it comes to experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of it's one of the most befuddling things as a Maru fan is his inability to exploit the meta.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we look back when Hellbats were a thing, he was really good at using Hellbats. In fact, that's like most of why I think he went so underrated in his SL run is because people thought, oh, he just uses Hellbats.
Yeah.
But then, Hellbats got patched out and he adapted and he figured out his own style after that, played more, standard and used some more fundamental tricks against innovation and rain.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but when it comes into like 2015 and the whole when Mech Terran became really good, Maru, from my perspective, should have been able to adapt to that because Maru is I've seen him play damn near every style. I've seen him play like TVP macro in early 2015 when it was almost impossible. I've seen him use like marine tank pushes in TVP in 2014. Like he's done all of he used that weird ass SCV pull build against Leenock at like 3 minutes. You pull your SCVs and proxy 2 racks. He had that long stretch where he would basically proxy 2 racks in the opponent's vision and then win anyway, like he did in Maru versus Solar.
Yeah, I remember
that phenomenal game. Like he has all of these styles and he's so open to all of it, and of course like proxy Marauder, like he used versus Flash.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow he wasn't able to adapt to the mech thing in 2015, which really held him back.
Yeah.
And this time he's actually seen an opportunity for a build of that caliber.
Yeah.
That's probably slightly overpowered and definitely can be used to dominate a matchup, but is also quite difficult and
I think the jury's still out of whether or not it's overpowered, I think.
I definitely don't think it's too overpowered. I think that it's one of those builds where the result is obviously very, very cool, but the amount of effort and studying and practicing that it takes to get to that point where it's really, really powerful is probably worthwhile. Like it's probably like fair.
Like when I think about like overpowers, like let's think about Brood War for a second. If you think about
it's definitely not that bad.
Like if you think about Terran Mech and Brood War, it's like incredibly overpowered if you get there, but it's incredibly hard to get there. And that's why that's why people consider it fair in a sense. It's like you had to go through so much shit to get to that point.
Yeah.
Whereas like you think about my famous example, the most disgusting period of StarCraft 2 history, Broodlord Infestor. It's very easy to get to Infestor. It's incredibly easy to get Infestor. So in my opinion, like that's the
especially because Queen range, right?
Yeah, Queen range.
Like, that just made it easier to defend.
Infestors got buffed basically. Like that made it incredibly easy. So like that's like when I look at these Maru builds, it's not like maybe we'll get to the point where a bunch of Terrans are able to copy him and emulate it and make it look easy to do. But when I'm watching Maru, it doesn't seem that easy, honestly. Like he's putting in like a bunch of execution, like with like the Banshees and like the bio that isn't easy. That isn't even easy to emulate anyway. And then on top of that, he's putting in the strategic stuff. So unless somebody like snoots this build, and what I mean by snoot this build is like he figures out the composition, and he figures out like Amaro's like game composition, and then like reverse engineers it so it's like super defensive and super easy to do, in a sense. Like I don't think it's going to be replicated by a majority of Terrans. It's just a bit too hard to do. So we'll see. I think the jury's still out as to whether or not this is actually overpowered or whether or not it's just a Maru thing.
I just think like Maru saw an opportunity for this very powerful build to be utilized. And even though it takes an immense amount of effort, experimentation, refinement, all of these things that are really, I think, the core of what makes StarCraft 2 a great esport, because you can see the experimentation in real time compared to some other games. It's just it's one of the most beautiful and interesting things that has happened in Legacy of the Void so far, I think, and it has me quite hopeful for the future. I mean, I think a game where things like this, where you can have like this ridiculous build that continues to evolve and grow, I think that speaks to the heart of StarCraft and why I enjoy it as a game so much. And I'm happy that Maru has finally managed to accomplish it, and I think it goes quite a long way to help in his case. Probably not for the GOAT, but to be, you know, in that top 10, top 7, maybe one day top 5 conversation.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll see how it goes in Super Tournament and the next GSL season. It feels crazy because it feels like a lot has happened this year, but we still have 2 full GSL seasons left. Like, it's gonna be very enjoyable to see how things grow and change.
Yeah, for some reason there's more tournaments this year. It's kind of weird now that I think about it.
Yeah,
but
it's been a surprisingly good year for StarCraft so far, and I think we've really needed that.
Well, I mean,
after 2016 and 17,
well,
it's nice to finally get back to a point where the game quality is high, and I think players are starting to figure it out. Obviously, I don't really buy into the modern era as the highest skill era. I know you don't either, but I think it's started to get very refined in a way, and that's good to see. That's very, very good to see.
Basically, I think this Mario is probably the best version of Mario, even though if we're talking about like highest peak mechanical skill, I think 2015 trumps this Mario. But that version of Mario would never think of this. Basically, is my point.
I think this version of Maru is one where he feels more whole now. It feels like he's very much matured, and he's comfortable using every element of his play style.
Yeah.
Whereas before he really only used mechanical play. Now he does, you know, he has this wonderful build. He's a very adaptive, wonderful macro player.
Yeah.
He's as good as ever when it comes to this wide array of mid-range builds, as we saw versus stats. Very creative, very clever, coming up with off-brand mid-game builds.
Yeah.
He's a good early-game scouter. I think he's always been quite a good scouter. He has good instincts for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Of course, he has a great repertoire of cheese. His mechanics aren't as great as they once were.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But he was literally a top 2 micro player of all time.
Yeah, basically it's him and Parhin. Funny.
Yeah, it's him and Parhin. It's him and Parhin, and then that one gap.
Yeah.
Both of those players are so ridiculously insane.
Yeah, when they were at the peak. Yeah.
Yeah. And now he's a very good micro player. I think he's still obviously very capable. And we saw a good amount of, you know, solid micro against stats, but he doesn't. It feels like he doesn't really use it as much as he used to because he knows that he can't.
Yeah, it's not as really awe-inspiring as it once was. Like, that used to be like a straight up win condition for Mario. Yeah. It's not a win condition. Now it's like you can get an edge, maybe. You can get an edge or an advantage, maybe, but that's about it.
He can execute. Like, he can execute, I think, almost anything he wants to do. It's just, I don't think he can look at a game and say, I'm just going to drop you. I'm just going to drop random shit at you, and eventually I'm going to win out because I'm just going to micro everything perfect.
Yeah.
He can't do that anymore.
Yeah. I think his evolution is very similar to Rain. Basically, remember Rain in 2014, 2013? He was much more mechanically sound, in my opinion. But you go in 2015, that's the one he wins the GSL, and he's nowhere near mechanically sound at that point. But he was smarter, and he was more willing to cheese.
For sure.
Like, he was basically abusing his like rep as like, the all-time defensive Protoss. Next game, cheese. The all-time defensive Protoss. Third game, cheese. Like, he just kept cheesing and kept working. It's like he basically did like an MVP almost.
Yeah. I think I said this back then. I think if a good macro player, someone like Innovation or Rain, was able to do builds like Haas, it would be unstoppable. Like you couldn't stop Raid if he like learned to do all of the shit Haas can.
Yeah. Or
Or like someone very very overtly
if
cheesy like
SOS had
that.
the skills of
Yeah,
parting, maybe like
yeah.
it would feel like impossible to beat. But
Like just someone who can both play the macro game completely solid, completely reasonable, doesn't have many flaws in it, but can also bring out this completely wonky build. And obviously, I don't think Terran is as creative as Protoss when it comes to the wonky
I mean,
builds.
you say that, but we're
But
talking about Maru. Like
yeah,
that.
but Maru is definitely. I think he's a person who has embodied that mindset,
Mhm.
and he has this perfect array of. He can literally just 2-rax you back-to-back games, or he can do this insane mega late game
Yeah, but I
strategy
mean,
that he's been working
obviously,
on
everybody
for
knows when
months.
the 2x is coming. For anybody who watches this podcast, shout out to Party.
Apparently, Dark didn't. Apparently, Dark needs
Not
to
my fault.
listen
Not
to
my
more
fault.
Team
Dark is not
Liquid.
a fan.
I think with his recent GSL win,
Okay.
I think me saying this is gonna trigger Ollie really hard. But I'd put Maru as like pretty equal to Zest in terms of overall legacy.
Okay.
Because they both have that one spectacular start.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Zest with his Korean championship, Maru with his OSL. I think those are two of the most underdog championships of all time.
Well, Zest is not
Um,
quite as much because like before he started it, he like all killed SKT.
yeah, but it's still like this run from a player that we just didn't expect
Yeah.
at all.
Okay.
It's not quite the same, and I think Zest was definitely more revolutionary and innovative, whereas Maru kind
Like
of did his own thing.
Mario shit doesn't get like go
Yeah,
out there, but it's actually
yeah.
similar to a lot of Terran players. Like Pulse shit, never adopted by any of the other Terran players. Neither was
Hmm.
Tejas. The only person who was like MVP, but that was like because it was mech.
Hmm.
But
And then, of course, Zest has the phenomenal peak at the start of 2016,
mm-hmm.
and Maru has the phenomenal peak at the start of 2015, and now in 2018 as well. And I think Maru's overall consistency is a bit higher. I'm not sure who I would pick between the two right now, but I think they're fairly similar career-wise as these, even though they're very different in terms of play style, but they're both very innovative. They're both very peak dominant, where Zest at his peak is a completely different player from like the Zest of a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Maru at his peak is completely different to him in like 2016 or even most of 2017.
Yeah.
So I'd put both of them just to give it a number. I think I'd put Maru number 8 and
Okay.
Zest number 6 or number 7
All right.
right now.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see what Murray does this year.
Yeah.
Like if he's able to sustain this level of dominance, then it becomes more of a.
I mean,
It becomes more into his
I mean, it
favor.
looks possible at least in TVZ. I don't know about the
Yeah.
rest of his matchups because it's not like anybody's truly challenged him very hard.
Hmm.
So we have to see. Like,
Yeah.
basically,
Only time is gonna tell.
at least for TVZ, basically Maro's put himself in like a weird position, like very similar to like the MVP position in 2012,
Yeah.
where he's doing something that literally no other Terran could think of at that moment in time. And so he's the only one that could come up with an answer if somebody finds an answer for him.
Yeah. We have 4 different TVZs in the first round of GSL Super Tournament.
Yeah.
Maru versus Sue, Dark versus Alive, Innovation versus Rogue, which is going to be really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and Gumiho versus Solar.
Yeah.
So this tournament is really going to speak to the TVZ meta right now, I feel.
Yeah.
Even though obviously like Gumiho and Alive aren't the best Terrans,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be an interesting showcase of how the style has evolved and
Yeah.
where both Maru and non-Maru in the matchup.
Yeah. And it looks like, well, assuming like Maru somehow gets past Sue, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Or
And
Classic
then
or
we might
SOS. Those are pretty
see,
close too. So
yeah, we might see Maru versus Classic,
yeah.
which would be the what if IM finals
Yeah.
that a lot of
Yeah.
people were getting excited for.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, plenty of good players in this one. All right.
Yeah,
So you have any final
big.
words about Maru or?
I mean, I have a very special place in my heart for Maru for being the first player that I really gravitated toward. And even though it's at times very, very frustrated, I think I will always be a Maru fan in my deepest of hearts.
All right.
And hopefully he just continues to play how he's been playing, because I've loved watching it this year, which is a feeling that I haven't had for quite a while, really since like 2016 Pro League.
Mm-hmm.
Since then he's been a shell of himself, and it's
Well, you gotta find the right
it's
build,
so
cause like
it's so ridiculous. Like I don't it's
I
unbelievable
don't.
to see a player like rebound this hard 8 years into their StarCraft 2 career.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is like nobody like really breaks it down, but like each of the expansions and each of the patches within the expansions is its own. It's basically its own like mini game or its own game.
Yeah,
So
basically, yeah.
like so it doesn't surprise me that hard that like people break down often. It's just because each game like nobody bothers to analyze it, but each iteration specifically targets not by design, but like it ends up being that way, where like specifically targets some like area of expertise that is generally like put above the rest. So like I'll give you a pretty easy example. Basically, Ryung dies straight up from Wings of Liberty to Heart of the Swarm because positioning in TVT no longer matters as much as it once did.
Yeah.
Right, and that kind of thing happens a lot, and so it's very and so if you want to figure out like a player's like style, what he did, just figure out when he died and like the patch or expansion that like killed him, basically.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the fact that basically he figures out this Ghost Raven thing shows like it's not like it may not be that Mario was necessarily bad. It could have just been like the entire like game was bad for him until I
Yeah,
found that
or
out. Like we don't know yet,
maybe
right?
maybe he just needed a couple years to develop more, mentally,
Yeah,
become a little smarter. Because I mean, he is only like 20 right now.
yeah,
Like it's wild. He's still one of the younger players in our
yeah,
agent
yeah.
scene.
Basically,
8 years into his
basically at age like
career.
19, he figured out MVP was truly the greatest of all
Yeah,
time, and now he's
basically, yeah.
maybe who knows, but yeah, and Mario's definitely I think
I
uh
I think this run of form by him has really cemented him as an all-time great
I mean
player
he was already an all
and
time great player
someone.
in my opinion. Just
I think he was debatable, but I think he's definitely gone to that next tier of player
yeah,
with this run,
hmm
where he's shown the ability to add another
yeah.
dimension to his
This is
play
definitely a new
and to,
dimension.
continuously progress over the years.
Yes,
Whereas he's been pretty stagnant the past like 2.5 years, really.
but yeah, he's a pretty yeah. I think overall Mario's just generally been a great player and.
Yeah.
At least for right now, his play style is probably the most interesting to watch of anybody in the scene by a long shot
Yeah.
because he's basically doing something. He's basically creating an entire meta. So those times are pretty rare, and it's not like a Protoss meta where unless you play Protoss, you can't really notice it as much.
Yeah.
Like
It feels a little easier to appreciate than Protoss, but
yeah,
of course Protoss players will always disagree with that. Protoss is just a very, very odd race.
yeah,
And it's hard to understand unless you play it.
yeah. And then like
But
Zerg's a bit more subtle. Like nobody
yeah.
realized like Sue was basically like way above everybody else in terms of macro injections, or that life was like
Yeah.
tactically beating the shit out of everybody. But at least when it comes to Terran, you can generally immediately notice that they're doing something really weird. I don't know why, but that's just been the case.
Yeah. I think it's because Terrans are typically like very straightforward. So when like Tasia and Innovation, two of the Terran greats,
Mm-hmm.
they're pretty standard. Like obviously Tasia does quite a bit differently, but I still consider that like pretty standard macro play.
No, if we're
Like
talking
he uses Marines, he uses Medivacs, he uses
like when we
Widow
talk about
Mounts
Tasia,
and
I
Hawks.
actually think it's very different. But yeah, I'll agree. Like he uses the same composition and the same
Yeah.
builds.
It's like same compositionally and same build wise. Like he obviously a bit differently, but
No, it's like
they use the
extraordinarily.
same.
It's extraordinarily different
Yeah,
because here's the
obviously.
point, I guess. When we talk about Brood War, for instance, majority of that time in the matchup of like ZVT, it was always the same types of unit compositions, like Zergling
Hmm.
into Defiler into Lurker, Zergling into Muta to Defiler into Lurker. Basically, it's kind of how it went into Ultras, but it's how you use the units that gave you the
Hmm.
flavor of the player, that gave you the uniqueness, right? And if you go ahead and watch if you want, but it doesn't really matter what build every Terran uses, but you can almost always distinctly tell a Tasia game from any other of the Terrans because Tasia is the only person that's willing to play the defensive macro game into the all
Yeah,
time great players. He lets Rain play his
yeah,
game. He lets
that's a
Zest play
great
his
point.
game. He lets Innovation plays his
That's a
game.
great point.
And he played Sue plays his game. And he beats them all at it. So it's a very like even though he's playing like standard, strategically speaking, he's actually playing such a different style from the rest
Yeah.
of the Terran race that even like 8 years later, nobody's ever really played that way. Except, I guess, MVP and I guess maybe this version of Maru. But
Yeah.
it's a different kind of thing because both of them had end game compositions that could instantly win. Like Tasia didn't have that. So,
Yeah. So I think we've said a lot that we needed to say.
yeah.
I think Maru is phenomenal talent who is finally starting to match his mechanics with some real smarts and some real builds behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot left to say. We'll be having another podcast on this in a few months if he, just wins everything
Yeah,
for like 3 months.
maybe you will. Maybe it's like, oh, Mario was truly the greatest of all time. Like, no, man, fire's the disc
Yeah.
or some bullshit I'll pull out. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
All right.
I think after this year we might want to do something definitively examining Maru in the all-time great conversation. It's kind of hard to do right now because we're right in the middle of
I mean,
what could
I've
be
already
a
done
great
I've
team.
already done it basically. Like,
Yeah,
not this one obviously, but like I did it in
yeah,
2015, so it feels like kind of weird
yeah.
for
Of
me to
course.
redo it. I'll let somebody
Yeah.
else do that. I think this
Well,
time
we'll,
around.
we'll see what happens. I might write an article about it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Okay.
But
All right.
I think this definitely changes that conversation a bit, which is great. I like seeing it.
All right.
So I think we're pretty much done
All
here.
right. All right. So that's it. See you guys later.
Yeah.